Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8 minutes before 8, time to get an update on the Ukrainian crisis, and not least the efforts being made now to provide refuge for Ukrainians seeking to leave the country and leave that troubled area. Let's turn to Technology and Digital Economy Minister Chris Philp, who joins us now. There is a lot of criticism of what the Home Office has done, or many would say has failed to do. How justified is that in your view? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Look, I mean, the UK is doing a lot to help ease this humanitarian catastrophe. I mean, before we get on to refugees, we're spending £400 million helping people in the region. That is more than any other country in the world. On the refugee question, yeah, there is definitely more to do. The first thing the Home Secretary announced yesterday was removing the requirement, as you know, to have the biometric details taken, so fingerprints and so on, if someone is coming here to join family with a Ukrainian passport. That was previously a very significant bottleneck in the system because people had to physically get to, for example, Warsaw, to the visa application centre. That's why yesterday that requirement was removed and the process is entirely online, making it much faster and much easier. There's going to be a further announcement coming in the next few days about a sponsored visa route where local authorities and families and others can welcome a refugee from Ukraine to stay with them, to accommodate them, and the full details are going to come out very shortly. So I think across all of that taken together, the UK is stepping up to the plate, but in particular by being the largest donor in the world of aid going into that region.
Just coming back to the aspect of refugees and noting that as recently as last year you served as Minister for Immigration and Compliance, how fair is it that for some of these individuals, Minister, they've travelled thousands of miles in fear of their lives, and when they seek for a visa to enter the United Kingdom, they're meant to fill in a 14-page document including proof of residence in Ukraine? If you were running for your life, do you think you'd make sure you had your council tax bill?
Yeah, well, I think what they need is their Ukrainian passport, and 90% of people who are coming out of Ukraine do have their passport with them. On the broader point about the UK's attitude to refugees, I mean, it's worth remembering this. When the Syria conflict happened, we resettled over a period of 5 years 25,000 people. That was from the Syria region directly back to the UK. That was more than any other European country. When the Chinese clamped down in Hong Kong, we opened up a new visa route for those British nationals in Hong Kong who wanted to leave the Chinese Communist Party's crackdown. 104,000 people have applied under that scheme. And then finally, with Afghanistan, in August, we flew out 15,000 people in a matter of 2 weeks. Again, more than any other European country. And over the coming 5 years, we're going to welcome another 20,000 Afghan refugees, right, mostly women and children. So I think if you take the UK's record on helping genuine refugees, those things I just mentioned are pretty impressive, to be honest.
2 weeks in Afghanistan, 15,000 is indeed highly commendable. You'll be aware we've had around 2 weeks of the Ukrainian conflict. 22,000 Ukrainians have applied for visas. Do you know how many have been granted?
The figure I got yesterday was about 1,000, and which is too low. And hang on, let me finish.
I'd like to finish. No, if I may. So 14 days of Afghanistan, we get 15,000 of these poor individuals out. 14 days broadly of Ukraine, we manage 1,000. This is appalling. This is the relegation zone, isn't it, Minister?
So first of all, there is going to be there is already a surge of resource going into the Home Office's visa application process. But the Afghanistan situation was different because what we were doing there, if you remember, back in August, hang on a sec, Nick, we had aeroplanes, UK aeroplanes, directly flying people out of Kabul airport. Obviously, we're not doing that in Ukraine because, for obvious reasons, there's Russian fighters flying all over the place. Indeed. So the situations are different.
Yes, I hear that. But if we compare with Ireland, our near neighbour, they've processed 2,500 of these. And I hate to talk about these are all individuals and people who are fleeing war, but we do need to talk numbers. And again, I remind you, for the United Kingdom, it's 1,000. So we are lamentably behind our Irish friends. Why? Could it be that we have a Home Secretary who doesn't know the difference between Calais and Lille? Maybe she thinks she's settling them in Walsall, not Warsaw. Do you think that might be it?
No, I don't. Look, the Home Office are stepping up their efforts enormously. The announcement you made yesterday about the removing the need for biometrics will, for Ukrainian passport holders with family here, will massively speed up the process. It's right they did that, but let's also not lose sight. Let's also not lose sight of the fact we are providing more aid to the humanitarian crisis, for almost £500 million than any other country in the world.
But why so long? Why announce on Thursday you can do something by Tuesday? Why not by this morning? Why the drag?
Well, they've got the Home Office, I suppose, have to update their IT systems and make sure they're operationally ready. There's always a bit of a gap between the announcement and the operation, and the gap is about 4 days. So that's, I guess, as fast as the Home Office were able to do it. But they are massively increasing the resources available to process these applications. It's right they do that as part of our wider efforts in Ukraine, which include, of course, providing lethal weapons to the Ukrainian government and to those brave Ukrainian soldiers and volunteers who are fighting the barbaric invasion. We're now up to 3,615 anti-tank weapons. We're shipping in javelins. We're looking at putting in some anti-aircraft missiles as well, because really what we need to see is the barbaric Russian invasion, which has included shelling hospitals and shooting civilians leaving via humanitarian corridors. We need to help the Ukrainians to repel this terrible, barbaric invasion that the Putin regime have perpetrated.
Let me ask you, moving on to other areas. Many people think it's taken a long time to impose some of these sanctions. Why did it take so long with Roman Abramovich? And can you tell us what it was that finally persuaded the government to take the action it announced yesterday?
Well, these Russian oligarchs have very expensive lawyers. They're highly litigious. It was very important to make sure this was done in a way that was totally legally watertight and legally defensible, because if we'd have jumped the gun and done it too soon and then it had been challenged, you would rightly have been the first person to criticise us. So the Foreign Office got it into a place where it was legally watertight and then took the measure, not just against Abramovich yesterday, but against other leading oligarchs who control companies like Rosneft, Gazprom, VTB Bank, Rosia Bank. These are Putin's closest cronies who facilitate his murderous regime. And this comes on top of over 300 Russian individuals and entities we've sanctioned already. And it comes on top of the frozen Russian bank assets amounting to some £250 billion, more than the EU, more than the United States. So it's part of a wider set of measures which are having an effect, because the Russian stock market is closed, the ruble is down by 40%, they've had to put their bank interest rate up to 20%, and they're about to default on their sovereign debt. So this is crippling the Russian economy, as it should, because Putin's regime must pay the price, literally, for the barbaric atrocities they're committing by shelling hospitals, including a maternity hospital where women were giving birth, shooting civilians fleeing down humanitarian corridors. They're despicable acts, I think, amount to war crimes, which is why they've been referred to the International Criminal Court by the United Kingdom and 37 other countries. Very
graphic description, so I'm sure, and just to quote some of your words back, closest cronies of Vladimir Putin, one of whom surely must count as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. His stepdaughter, Polina Kovaleva, lives in London. She has a £4.4 million flat in Kensington, bought, according to land registry records, with no mortgage in 2016. MPs such as Chris Bryant have kept her call to have sanctions. Do you agree?
Well, all of these are getting looked at very closely. And of course, there is an emergency bill going through Parliament that should become law next week, which will enable us to sanction an even wider range of people who are associated.
What are the additional powers required? What powers do you need that the government doesn't currently have?
Well, there's a number of things that will be in this bill. One is the point about transparency of ultimate beneficial ownership, which may help in the case that you just mentioned. Secondly, making our powers around unexplained wealth orders more powerful. Those were introduced about 4 or 5 years ago. They can be strengthened. So people who show up in London, a bit like the case you mentioned, buying a £4 million property with apparently no legitimate means to do so, those unexplained wealth orders are designed to get behind that and potentially confiscate assets that have been acquired, like expensive property, where there's no good explanation for where that money came from, besides widening the sanctions regime. So they're going through Parliament on an emergency basis and will give us an ability to act even further than the measures that we've taken already, which are pretty comprehensive, have had a crippling effect on the Russian economy. But given how barbaric that regime is, we should be going further, and we'll be doing so.
And lastly, can I get a word from you, please, Minister, on a story we featured earlier in the show here on LBC? It's a woman called Tanya Spinks, who lived in Lviv, has been trying to get to the UK for 4 weeks. They're currently in Poland. They have 2 British children with British passports. They've got out to Poland. They've been advised by the Home Office to go to Kyiv. Yes, that you did hear correctly, Kyiv, to get their visas. Yet more incompetence by the Home Office, isn't it, Minister?
Well, that example is clearly wrong. You said they're in Lviv.
No, they've left Lviv. They're now in Poland.
They're now in Poland. So if they have any family members in the UK, then they'll be able to now make an online application to get a letter letting them get onto an aeroplane. If they don't have any family in the UK, then if their children have British passports, they should be able to get on a plane with those passports, and it would be obviously reasonable for the parents to be able to come with them. They should make their way, if they're unclear, they should make their way to the British consulate in Warsaw if they're in Poland as quickly as possible. And it sounds like they should be able to come here.
I'm grateful for your time today. Technology and Digital Economy Minister Chris Philp, appearing here on LBC. 3 after 8 news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, people in Britain will be encouraged by the government to open their homes to refugees fleeing the conflict in Ukraine. A new humanitarian route will be set up, allowing the public to offer rooms to Ukrainians who don't have family